Hi, this is John Fleck. You may remember me as Silik from Star Trek Enterprise and several other characters from the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and you are listening to Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome back to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. Today we're chatting with John Fleck, who you may remember best as the leader of the Sulibans, Silik, from a whole bunch of episodes on Star Trek Enterprise. But before he became that ill-fated shapeshifter, he was also the Romulan Taibak on the TNG episode The Mind's Eye, as well as a Cardassian in the DS9 episode Homecoming, a Karema traitor in the DS9 episode The Search Part 1, the Romulan Koval in Deep Space Nine from the extremely long-titled Arma Enim Silent Leges, and the junk dealer Abaddon from the Voyager episode Alice. John also appeared in films and shows like The Naked Gun 2.5, Seinfeld, Howard the Duck, Pink Cadillac, Babylon 5, Carnival, Weeds, Max Headroom, Northern Exposure, True Blood, and The Orville, just to name a few. While you may recognize him from his many roles he's had in Hollywood, you might not know so much about his theatrical career and his artwork. Fleck's mainstream roles helped support his performance art career, one that is very acclaimed, along with his time on stage. John has won 4 LA Critics Circle Awards, 8 Dramalog Awards, and 6 LA Weekly Awards for his thought-provoking and often controversial performances. And speaking of, Fleck is one member of the NEA Four, where he and 3 other artists filed a lawsuit against the National Endowments for the Arts that went all the way to the Supreme Court and has continued to have ramifications on the art world today. This subject is covered very in depth in the new documentary by Kevin Duffy, John Fleck is Who You Want Him to Be, which we're also going to discuss in this interview. Speaking with Fleck is like having a conversation with a force of nature. He's a whirlwind of energy and ideas, highly expressive and emotive, and much like the title of his film implies, you never know which John Fleck you're talking to until it happens. He's a lot of fun to speak with and has a ton of great stories, and I think you're going to really enjoy the time we spent together. But before we jump into our interview, I want to ask you, are you following Trek Untold on social media? It's the best way to keep up to date on who's going to be the next guest on Trek Untold and to learn all about the other cool things that are happening here. So if you're on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, go ahead and look up Trek Untold, all one word, and give us a follow and a like. If you'd like to help support the show monetarily, go ahead and check out teespring.com/stores/trekuntold to check out some of the merchandise we have available. This includes t-shirts, mugs, phone cases, sweatshirts, stickers, and a whole bunch more. So go ahead and check out teespring.com/stores/trekuntold. You can also support our show by visiting patreon.com/trekuntold. If you become a paid subscriber to Trek Untold, you'll get first access to the show and a chance to ask our guests questions on future episodes. But most of all, please subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to it or watching it. And if you've already done that, please also leave a review and a rating if you can. Leaving ratings and reviews helps increase the visibility of podcasts on platforms like iTunes and other places like it. It shows that you're listening and that you like it, and that other people who are interested in the same subject are going to probably like it too. It helps us grow, it helps us get better guests, and it helps us keep bringing this amazing Trek Untold show to you. If you're already following us or have supported us in any other way, thank you, of course, for being a part of the Trek Untold family. There's a lot of Star Trek podcasts out there, and we're very grateful that you chose us to listen to. I'd also like to make a quick shout out to our friends at Triple Fiction Productions, who make some great 3D printed Star Trek inspired toys and replicas for fans of all ages and toys of all sizes. But you'll hear more about them a little later on in the show. Now, without further ado, let's beam up this week's guest. Computer, access interview file. Hello and welcome back to Trek Untold, and now joining us on the other side of the screen. Today we're joined by an actor and performance artist who is probably the only person to have gone toe-to-toe against Frank Drebin and Captain Jonathan Archer, and well, his characters didn't come out to tell the tale, but we've got the character actor today. Mr. John Fleck is joining us today. John, how are you?
Fine. How are you?
That's a good answer. It's I am fine, thank you. I'm glad we're all fine here because, the world's a crazy place, so to be honest, being fine is pretty good.
Stranger than science fiction, I'd say, the real world, huh? Jeez.
So let's kick things off today with the first question I like to ask all of my guests, and that's, what is your earliest memory of Star Trek?
My earliest memory. That's a trick question. My earliest memory of Star Trek. Huh. Well, I guess it goes back to the beginning, with the originals, Leonard Nimoy and those guys, and just that was fun. It was we watched it every week. We had to watch it live time. We had no tapes back then, so that was my first experience with Star Trek.
So were you really, really big fan of it, or was it just kind of like it was on TV, it was just a thing to do?
Was I a big fan? I wouldn't say I was a crazy fan, but I was pretty devoted. I think I watched every episode. So and if I missed an episode over the course of the last 50 years, I'm sure I've caught up with the episodes that I've missed.
Very good. So you grew up in Cleveland originally, right?
Well, we moved a lot. I went to like 11 different schools, so primarily Cleveland, but my dad was a restless a soul. So, every other year, a different school.
Tell us, I guess, a little bit of background information about yourself. Since you mentioned you moved around a lot, I guess kind of give us an idea of where John Fleck grew up, who his parents were, what they did, and what you wanted to be when you grew up as a little kid.
Oh boy. Well, I always kind of break my life down into, okay, what grade was I? Because yeah, I remember when I was 4 and 5. I have no memories before 4, but I used to stutter. I remember I had a horrible stutter, and uh, and um, and then we moved. When I was 5th grade, we moved. My father, we were in Cleveland, a suburb of Cleveland, and he packed up a trailer. We moved to California. He wanted to open a trailer court, and anyways, we came out here for about 8 months, and obviously in Yucaipa, California, they didn't want a trailer court at the time. So we packed everything up, and 6 kids and the family drove back across country. And then my dad he was a carpenter, a house painter, and he could build houses. One year he sold auto parts. He was just always, never really grounded in terms of what he wanted to do. But hey, we always had food on the table. Yeah, and he was a big drinking guy. And, it's funny, my mother died of Alzheimer's several years ago in Cleveland. And I went back and I was sitting next to her bed with a video camera. She always said, are you using that thing? I go, no, Mom, I'm just cleaning it. But, nobody ever told us about our stories or where we grew up as a family. I have no idea even who my grandparents really were, or before that. I was told my father's side came from Germany, Hungary, Yugoslavia, and my mother was Irish and French. But anyways, I got her to tell me some great stories. And one of the great stories she told me was when I was 4 or 5, he'd come home drunk. And she'd crawl into bed with me. It's funny, after she died, anyway, I don't want to get too crazy here, but anyways, she'd crawl into bed with me and she just said, if she could, why am I telling you these horrible stories? Matthew, what are you getting out of me? But anyways, the
good stuff.
That she crawled into bed and he wouldn't bother her or hurt her if she stuck with me. So anyways, me and my mom, we were like this, and growing up and against the bully. But I gotta say, as much as I hated my father all those years, he was the enemy. I can honestly say now in my ripe old age, I'm very thankful for the life I had, and I can honestly say that I love my father and my mother very much, and I got a lot of skills from my father. One thing he, in between all his jobs, he always painted, and I got I think a creative spark from him, and he always encouraged me to dance. So I learned how to dance. So you know what, I got a lot from my father. Okay, I didn't answer any of your questions really, but anyway, we just kept moving. I went to Catholic school for a few years. I went to public school, and I never acted. I tried to take an acting class. I was a business major. I wanted to be an accountant. My mother said I had to be an accountant, So and I balanced my father's books when he worked and did construction and everything. So I learned numbers really well. So I went to Cleveland State University, and but I kept flunking calculus, and so I quit. And I had a girlfriend at the time, and she was moving to California to go to acting school. She says, "Why don't you come out west and go to acting school?" I tried to take an acting class in college, but I was so terrified. I couldn't do it. I was too shy. But I came out here, and bada bing, bada boom, something happened. I blossomed out here in California.
And that was at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, right?
Yes, the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. I could have gone to New York or LA, but New York, even though I was in Cleveland, New York scared me. So I drove my little VW bug out to California, and here I am.
So there you are, yeah. And so, what are some of the lessons that you learned? Maybe I should ask, what's the most important lesson that you learned that you continued to use throughout your career that you picked up at? I was going to say the acronym, but that's like a horrible acronym. It's like AADA. That sounds like the dentist union. So never mind that. But
So the question is, what's one of the greatest lessons I've learned?
let's say, what's the most important thing you learned that you continue to use through your career?
Oh, geez. Well, one day at a time. Like that old song, New York, New York. One day it's kicks, then it's kicks in the shins. I don't know, just to take it one day at a time. My lesson for today is not to base my worth on the last acting job I had or how much money I made, and that I'm a creative being, and I just to be grateful for the creative gift. So that's kind of the greatest lesson. That's my life force, so to speak.
So where does performance art fit into this?
Where does performance art fit into this? Well, one might say all of us are performance artists to some degree, but I after I got out of the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in 1976, I started studying voice and dance. I was always and studying, and I had actually a 4-octave voice. I could really sing high countertenor, and I was a good mover and shaker. Anyways, nothing was happening for me. I was auditioning for a little theater out here, blah, blah, blah. And just feeling like, wow, where's my life going? But then I ended up getting somewhat into the punk movement in the, I guess, early 80s. It was kind of post true punk, but I kind of riding the wave at the end. And I used to hang out at this bar called the One Way in Los Angeles here in Silver Lake. And it was kind of, some might say an S&M gay leather bar. But it was a punk place, and they a friend of mine was DJing there, and he just played the best music. It's where the first time I ever heard Susie and the Banshees, or the Pretenders, or even Blondie. It was just like, wow. And anyways, he would throw these events called theoreticals and performance things, and he asked me to perform, and so I was opening for Edie Massey. I don't know if you know Edie Massey from John Waters' Pink Flamingos. She played the Egg Lady. So I was opening for, he had all these, freaks. And this was, back in the day when everybody was tattooed. It was before, those were the punks, it wasn't, nobody else was doing it. And they were rowdy, man. They'd throw bottles and just, ooh, So anyways, I remember I climbed on top of the bar at the One Way. Miss Edie Massey was off in the shadows there, getting ready for her show, and I remember it was a punk club, so I pulled my pants down and I sang, "There's no penis like show penis," and anyways, that got their attention, and nobody had thrown a bottle at me yet, so I started to sing a Puccini aria from Madame Butterfly, Un bel di vedremo, and I'm very. So, and then they loved it. So that was the beginning of my performance art career right there. And I really attribute that to saving my life and giving me a sense of community. And, I always felt like an outsider, and now I was kind of in with all the other outsiders. So it was a good thing. And it was before I started doing any TV or film or anything. I really didn't have much desire to go into that. I just kind of wanted to be a cutting edge artist. And I was okay being poor back then. You didn't need a lot of money to live here in Los Angeles. I lived in Silver Lake up on a hill, and I was paying like $95 a month for rent. And of course, now that same place is almost $2,800 a month. But those were the glory days. And I just kind of kept doing shows, and then other performance spaces would ask me to do stuff. And I kept studying with great people like Rachel Rosenthal, and dance and voice, and and writing and improv with the Groundlings. I always knew that because I did come out here to be an actor. So and I don't know, I just one day I decided I'm going to get an agent, and I got an agent and started doing small parts, and my first video thing I ever did was, I think, in ZZ Top's Legs, that MTV video. That was my first thing. Talk about overacting 101. But I did that, and then I did Howard the Duck. That was, I think, my second one, and that was a pretty big movie. That was, George Lucas, up in San Francisco. And
Yeah, I was going to ask about Howard the Duck. In fact, 'cause you were Pimples in that film, right?
I was, yes, Mr. Pimples. Yes. And
What a surreal film that is too, just in general.
did you ever see it? Howard the
I
Duck?
have. It is, yeah, it's my
Okay.
girlfriend's favorite movie. Also, it's like one of her favorites. And when she found out I was interviewing you, she's like, "Oh, Suliban's cool, but he's Pimples."
Forever Pimples. Funny. Well, one thing I learned, me never having a pot to pee in, they flew me up to San Francisco and we shot it, and they paid me. Boy, God, that was Hollywood money. I mean, now I look at it, I go, it wasn't that much, but for me back then, it was a lot. Anyways, I came back, and a month later, they said, oh, the sound was all bad, so we had to go back and shoot it again, and I got paid twice, and I go, wow, I like this Hollywood stuff. And then I think in about I don't know when my first Star Trek thing was, about 1990-ish, somewhere around there. Yeah, and then from there, they just, I remember David Livingston, he was one of the director creators of Star Trek. Which incarnation was it? The Next Generation. So my first one was The Mind's Eye. I should know my date, the years that I did that. I think it was 1991. And they liked me, and they started, David Livingston especially, and he kept offering me different parts. So I got to play all these different, characters, which was wonderful. And there you are. That's here I am today. Okay, next question.
Before we jump too deep into Star Trek, because there's a lot to get through, I actually wanted to ask you about one other thing. That's something I alluded to at the start of the show, and that's you were in Naked Gun 2.5, and you got to do a scene with Leslie Nielsen. I love hearing Leslie Nielsen's stories, so please, I hope you must have a pretty great one for your scene with him.
Oh, God. It's all a blur. Most of these times, you never even meet the stars. Okay, you come in, you barely have a rehearsal. It's just pretty much for blocking. Okay, you do it 5 times. Well, I don't think I ever said more than 5 words to him, so I don't have any great any stories. But wow, what an honor to work with him. Geez. Sorry to be a disappointment. I don't have any stories. I could make up one though.
I'd believe it if you did. I mean, I've heard a lot of wacky things about him.
He was very inappropriate. He behaved very inappropriately with me. No, I'm teasing. I'm sorry. I don't even remember what we did. I don't even remember the scene.
Oh, the scene is he's interrogating a bunch of I guess the bad guys, and most of them are all knocked out and beat up on the floor. And like one of them, he shakes and is like trying to get information. He's like, nope, and he dies. And he goes up to you and he's trying to get information. He's shaking you down, and he like says something like, you low life scum. He's like, well, if that's your attitude, and then you just die.
I gotta say, back in the day when I was doing TV and film, I always thought, oh, this is just a money job, and I it's not really, my art craft, so to speak. So I just kind of in and out. I never even watched them on TV. I never saw Naked Gun until reruns. Like most of my Star Treks, I've never seen either. So. Bad actor. Maybe I could have been more successful had I been paying more attention. I don't know.
Well, that actually answers one of my questions. In fact, 'cause that's a common thing. Is I like to ask folks if they actually watch the performances on Star Trek. So, are you typically a person that doesn't watch the things that you've been in?
Well, I've been doing it for so long. Back in the day, we had no streaming. And if you missed it on live TV, I didn't own a television set until, probably about 1994. I just didn't have one, so I didn't know. And I gotta say, I think my life was a little more focused back then. But now, when I'm on it, I'll watch it, and then I never watch it again. I don't know. I have a hard time watching myself, but I'm a little more objective. I guess I couldn't be as objective before, and I just never watched myself.
Well, let's see if I can refresh your memory a little bit about some of the Trek appearances, because there are like way, way, way too many. I mean, basically, there's stunt performers who have been, hundreds of characters of the shows. Then there's like John Fleck, who's among one of the 3 actors who has been in like as many roles as you've had, who had actually speaking lines, which is pretty insane in itself. But yeah, let's just start actually. TNG, your first thing is season 4, The Mind's Eye, and you got to play a Romulan. But before you were cast as that very first Romulan, had you auditioned previously for Star Trek?
Oh, good question. Let me think about that. What do you even know what year that was that I played the Romulan
I
character with
think that was 93, I want to say.
Koval? Wasn't my name Koval? I believe.
Koval was
I
so
think,
this one's Taibak. Koval is the one he did in DS9. You were
damn,
close.
I know your facts. That was '93. Had I auditioned for? I might have auditioned for one or two. I don't remember. But I remember I had just gotten my big agent, you might say, that's really started getting me work around 90 91. So I may have auditioned for Star Trek a couple of times before I landed this, but I don't remember what. But like I said, once I got that, all of a sudden it started happening. I guess I fit the physicality that they wanted, and I got that little reptilian quality that they love for these parts.
Now, was that your first time doing heavy prosthetics?
Yes, and it wasn't that heavy. Yeah, when I look at my life in retrospect, that was pretty light prosthetics. But yeah, in terms of the ears and the forehead, yeah, that was probably the heaviest prosthetics I'd ever done up to that date.
And so your character Taibak, he's pretty interesting because he is a Romulan who is interrogating and torturing Geordi LaForge, played by LeVar Burton. So you got to do some scenes with LeVar in this
Uh-huh.
bizarre torture chamber. I don't know if you remember that as well. Do you
I
have any
kind of
memories of LeVar and that horrible, horrible torture chamber?
well, I remember LeVar was tired and he had to wear those contacts. And he was he was not happy about all the times that he had to take him in and out. I remember, and it kind of added to his, maybe he's a method actor. I don't know how he works, but it added to his frustration in the scene. But other than that, I was just a shy guy, and I never. God, I wish I had been more a little like, oh, hey, like I just never wanted to intrude. So, I just show up respectfully and thank you. And, it's funny, an unrelated story in terms of, I remember working on Pink Cadillac. Clint Eastwood directed that. And I had a scene and in the background, there's some guy on stage contorting. And it turns out to be Jim Carrey. It was one of his first roles. He had no lines. He was just like a contortionist. And at lunch, I remember I'm very shy. Like, oh, all the stars, Clint and they're sitting at one table. Well, I'm too shy. So I go to the next one. But I see Jim Carrey, just an extra in the background, just sits right next to Clint Eastwood and starts talking. I go, damn, man, he had balls. So, shoulda, coulda, woulda. But just shy little Johnny, just showed up and did the best that he could and then left the set.
You get to see it all Patrick Stewart or Jonathan Frakes, Brent Spiner, anybody else, or even Michael Dorn in the makeup chair? Or what was your shoot day? Do you
No.
remember much of it?
Well, when you shoot, it's just, you're in the
Boom, boom,
makeup,
boom.
the trailer with, the person you're shooting the scene with. So I never saw any of the other leads in that particular genre of Star Trek. No, that was my only that was Next Generation, right?
Yeah, that was Next Gen. Yeah. And so this is going to be a common question I ask you also, and that's about the costume you wore. And I don't think I've actually spoken to anybody who's been a Romulan previously.
Uh-huh.
So how was that outfit? Was it constricting to you? I mean, obviously you're wearing all this makeup, which can't be easy either, but how was that
Right.
costume to go along with it?
Well, I'd say for all the Star Trek costumes, they're very form-fitting, and you got to make sure you suck in your gut, and stand up straight. There's no slouching in outer space, and I just learned tricks of the trade. How to position your chin, to keep your chin down so your eyes open big, especially when you're wearing contact lenses and stuff like that. And I don't know what angles work good and how to, even though you're a human playing an alien, there are certain ways of moving that conveys otherworldliness. But in terms of that one particular part, 1993. I mean, were you even born in 1993, Matthew?
I was around. Yeah. I
You were
actually,
around.
I barely remember the episode. Rewatching a lot of TNG again today, it's like all new to me, even though I was watching it as a kid. So it's kind of fun to
Okay.
relive in that regard.
Geez, yeah, I can't remember, but I kind of remember it was a grayish kind of
Yep.
shiny.
Big shoulder pads.
Yeah, big shoulder pads, very dynasty kind
Yeah.
of Joan Collins from that era. But yeah, I always remember that tight fitting. And if there were full body shots, you always had to wear a dance belt because there are no bulges, no male bulges in outer space. No reference to any sexual identity, so to speak.
Well, we'll talk more about your bulges in a little bit, but I want to follow up now with your second Trek appearance, Deep Space Nine. You're in the season 2 premiere, Homecoming, and that one I'll help refresh your memory here. So this one, you did the scene with Nana Visitor and Cole Meany, and you guys are in an outdoor shoot, which I imagine was probably like Vasquez Rocks or somewhere around there.
Right, right.
And you're a
I do
Cardassian.
remember that day. It was so fucking. Yeah, I don't know if you're allowed to say those words on
Well,
this,
it's
but
too late now.
it's too late now. It was so friggin' hot that day. I remember I was in the trailer, and I remember going out there with all this makeup, and you're just dripping underneath, which frustrates all the makeup artists because your prosthetics are always coming loose. So every 10 minutes, oh, we gotta glue it back in. And I remember Nana Visitor. Uh, I had the scene and the terrain. I think I'm wearing contacts. You can't see, it's all a blur. And I kept tripping. And I remember her, I could see her barely out of the corner of my eye, kind of laughing, trying to be respectful, but just like, oh, how awkward I was. And we had to do take after take. It was so hot and frustrating, but we did it. I don't even remember what we did, but I do remember the paycheck. Because I worked like 18 hours. It just took so long that I made like 7 times more money than what I would have made. And I go, yes, this is why we love unions. And thank you, Hollywood.
Yeah, thank you, Star Trek, for giving actors so many long days too.
Oh, hey, I often tell people I made a career out of playing non-human beings, and but they pay well for you to play non-human beings. So hey, bring it on.
So that scene is with Nana and Colm, and basically they're trying to get into this prisoner of war camp essentially. And so basically Colm is Kira's pimp, more or less. That's the most polite way to put it. And he's trying to get her in so they can shut down their shield barrier. So I think you decide to check out the merchandise, which is when Kira like high punches you in the face and you go flying, or at least the stunt person does. But that's the scene. Do you remember much about that?
I don't remember any of the scene. Thank you for telling me the scene. Yes, I know. I don't remember that at all. I blacked out. I think it was so hot and I was hyperventilating under all that makeup. I remember it was a big facial thing that I wore. What was I, a Kardashian? No, what was that?
I mean, Kardashians are pretty hideous. This was a Cardassian, so not quite as horrible
Oh,
looking.
I wasn't a Kim Kardashian? No?
Thankfully, no.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at myself here and I see I have a little thing. You know what? I'm writing this new show and I'm creating a COVID helmet for myself. I'm going to put a little COVID spice on here. I'm going to become Captain COVID. But every time I put it on my head, oh wait, I can't do it with my glasses. Every time I put it on my head, the hole's not big enough. I keep scratching my nose. So see.
The hole's not big enough. Quote John Fleck, 2021.
I need a bigger hole. Okay.
Let's jump to another DS9 episode, and this time around, you were a Karaman trader named Ornithar, and you're on the Bridge of the Defiant. This character, I know that the name probably means nothing, but this guy has even more of a nightmarish makeup. He has kind of like a crest across his face. Do you remember that?
Jesus, I remember that was I think the first time I didn't have to audition. David Livingston offered it to me. I go, oh, well, I like getting offers like this. It's nice. Other than that, I remember nothing. Who did I have my scene with?
You were with pretty much most of the main bridge crew. So you were with Avery Brooks, you were with Armin Shimmerman, Terry Farrell was there, Renee Auberjonois was there. I don't actually recall off the top of my head if Nana was there too, but it was a lot of the main crew.
Wow. I remember Renee in the makeup trailer and just him saying something effective. Welcome to the torture chamber, because he had all that makeup put on, and 3 hours later I was ready to go out there. But he was a nice guy. I remember Armin too. It's funny, they're both theater people. And I gotta say, I've always, there's something about the community of theater people that seem to be more, I don't know, human and welcoming than just TV film people. I don't know that they kind of had a more personal connection with me and I with them.
No, there's definitely something there. I mean, I've spoken with Armin. I've spoken with a lot of actors who have done Star Trek, who were classically trained, have done Shakespeare, have done a lot of theater work, and there is kind of a different quality around them. It kind of reminds me of a story I hear a lot with the Golden Girls. You'd have B. Arthur, who's from the theater world, so she was very kind of more closed off, more internal, and you had Betty White, who was outgoing. She was shaking hands with the audience. So there's definitely some kind of difference there between the TV and theater worlds.
Right. I think a lot of TV film actors, they just show up and, whereas theater, it's a more organic thing and it's more a human experience. Yeah. So you enjoy the process of discovery more. I think most in TV film is just show up, like usually you don't even get a rehearsal and, you shoot it. Whereas I think people like to feel the organic process a little bit more of humanity, kind of emotions and stuff like that.
So let's talk about that role, the other Romulan role you had, Koval, which we mentioned a little bit earlier on. That was from, I think, your last DS9 appearance, in fact. And in that one, that episode name, really stupid long. I'm not going to say it, but you did get to work with Adrienne Barbeau. Did you ever have any time with her on set?
Um, I don't remember Adrian much from that set, but she and I worked together on Carnival, that HBO series, and we got to bond there. In fact, she's been over to my house a couple of times for parties during that time. So I love Miss Barbeau. She's a nice, kind lady. But from back then, I don't have any memories, of her or even what character she played.
Okay, she was also a Romulan, yeah.
She was a Romulan as well. Okay.
Now I'm wondering too. I've heard this from another actor who basically played the same alien twice. They literally reused his prosthetic. Now, since you were a Romulan before, did they still have to recast you, or did they just happen to find yours in the archive somewhere and be like, "Here you go"?
I think there was enough time in between. They had to refit me and do the whole thing. Yeah, they don't hold on to them too long unless they know you're a recurring character. Then they'll hold on to it. So I had to go the straws in the nose. Do the whole thing again.
Now, this episode too, amongst all your Star Trek appearances outside of Enterprise, is the most dense amount of dialogue you had to do. Now, do you remember having to learn all those lines? Was it a challenge?
Ooh, that was like the courtroom scene.
Yep,
Wasn't
that's
there
the
like a
court one. Yep.
court? I do remember that very well. I was thinking, wow, this is like a little Shakespearean scene in a Star Trek. And I was like, okay, there's a lot of dialogue and a lot of technical dialogue, So but damn it, I did it. And I was proud of myself for doing it. And they were happy and I was happy, but I do distinctly remember that. I go, hey, I'm finally getting to act a little bit on a TV show. So it felt rewarding in that way.
That's definitely a good one. Yeah, it's definitely one of the more memorable ones outside of Silik. But yeah, last thing before we go over to talk about Silik, in fact, and that's your Voyager appearance in the episode Alice. Your Abaddon. He was a fast talking salesman. He owns a junkyard. A lot of crazy makeup in that one. A lot of fast talking lines. Do you recall that one?
With Kate Mulgrew,
Yep,
right?
with Kate Mulgrew. Yep.
One thing I remember, one scene we were shooting, it was very late, and Kate was tired, and the camera, we had it was a tricky shot where I had to fall and the camera had to follow me and Kate had to come in, and Kate was having a bad day. She kept her shoes. I guess she had rubber soles and was like carpeting her to buffer my fall or something. And she kept tripping. And she got so frustrated and so angry. I remember that, poor dear. But anyways, we did it. She was nice to me. She was just kind of like, oh, let's just get on with this. Sometimes you do a scene and then you spend an hour or two just for a teeny little shot because the camera can't pick it up. It can be frustrating. But anyway, you got to use that energy into what you got. But other than that, I do remember fast talking, like the salesman, just a fast talking con man in a way. So that was fun. That was a bit of a little lighter character on Star Trek. I like that.
It kind of felt to me like this was like the John Waters version of an alien in Star Trek.
Ha ha! Right. Yeah. It wasn't so.
And I find it kind of interesting too. We're talking about who John Fleck is, and that's related to your documentary title. Maybe we'll get to that a little bit later on too. But looking at the characters you played in Star Trek up to this point, they basically are two different types. There's the very introverted characters like the Romulans, who are very emotionless, and then you've got characters like Abaddon, and you've got Ornithar from the DS9 episode, you don't remember as well, who are just way more extroverted, way more outgoing, a lot more hand movements, a lot more energy. So I found it kind of interesting that you're playing these very different types of characters.
Well, hey, I'm, a trained actor who's capable of drama and comedy, and I really appreciated that they let me have that range of, characterization in this. And At first, I poo-pooed it like, oh, nobody's going to recognize me, nobody knows me. But you know what? If I look at it from a pure acting point of view, man, what great training. I mean, God, I couldn't have paid enough to take a class that would have taught me as much as that I learned doing that. So yeah, so it's fun to be scary and it's fun to be fun, comedic and all things considered. So what a gift, what a gift that was. Thank you, David Livingston, for giving me so many opportunities, and Rick Berman too. He was and Brannon Braga from actually, I just worked with Brannon on the Orville. He's one of the executive producers on the Orville. So hey, Star Trek legacy still lives on. They still bring me in for other.
And I'm glad you brought it up. In fact, I was going to ask about it later, but since you mentioned it, yeah, you were on the Orville in season 2, and again, you're doing heavy prosthetics. You're this weird vampire-looking alien called the Krill. It's kind of like a cross between Jem'Hadar and vampires in a lot of ways. How'd you enjoy working with Seth and that crew? Seth MacFarlane.
I gotta say, Seth is. I love Seth. Just what a nice, kind, humble person. I actually got to do 2 more episodes. We shot last. We got in right under the wire. We shot last February, March. In fact, the day after we finished shooting, like 3 days later, LA went into a lockdown. So we got that, but then they had to shut down all production. So supposedly they started up shooting more episodes of season 3, but now that with LA's production's shut down again, so they're thinking it'll hopefully the season will be released sometime by the end of 2021, but who the hell knows,
Trek Untold will return momentarily. Trek Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. If you're a Star Trek cosplayer looking for props, or toy collector looking to spice up your shelves, Triple Fiction Productions has you covered. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. You can expect the same amount of care and attention to detail in any of the items in their catalog, whether it's a prop replica for use in a fan film, or part of a cosplay, or accessories and playsets for figures from Playmates, Migos, or Diamond Select. Own your very own tricorder or phaser rifle with working lights, the bridge of the Enterprise E for your Playmates figures, or any other item from countless species and ships from the Star Trek universe. All products are 3D printed in the USA and are constantly evolving and improving based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit them at triple-fictionproductions.net or on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Frakes. If you're of a certain age, you may remember me as Commander Riker from Star Trek The Next Generation. And my wonderful brother Daniel died with pancreatic cancer 24 years ago. They opened him up, they diagnosed, they said, you've got 6 months to live. And that was it. He died 4 months later. And at that time, there was a 3% survival rate. Since then, we've grown to the embarrassingly high number of 10%. But a dear friend of mine, and probably all of yours, Kitty Swink, is one of those 10%. She has survived pancreatic cancer for 17 going on 18 years. Pancreatic cancer is the 3rd leading cause of cancer-related deaths in the United States, with a 5-year survival rate. That's just 10%. And more than 60,000 Americans are estimated to be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2021. More than 48,000 will die from the disease. Because symptoms are often vague, can be hard to detect. That's why I'm supporting the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, the leading patient advocacy organization committed to fighting the world's toughest cancer. PanCan is working hard to create outcomes for this devastating disease through its groundbreaking research. in early detection and better treatment options. PanCan drives progress by funding life-saving research, providing personalized patient services, and creating a community of supporters and volunteers like you who will stop at nothing to create a world in which all pancreatic cancer patients will thrive. You can help support our important mission by donating today at pancan.org. Thanks for your time.
We now return to Trek Untold.
Now, John, before we talk about Star Trek Enterprise, I want to discuss with you another very important event that happened in your life, and that's you were part of the NEA Four, which is basically the NEA stands for National Endowment for the Arts, and you and 3 other artists had your grants vetoed in 1990 by a man who said that your work was offensive. So let's spend a little bit of time chatting about that.
We became the NEA Four, me and 3 other performance artists. Well, the National Endowment for the Arts back in the old days. My experience happened in 1990. In 1989, I had a show I was doing called Blessed Are All the Little Fishes. Anyways, I won't go into details, but a friend said, why don't you apply for a National Endowment for the Arts grant, So I did, and it was for like $5,000, and I got it. And surprise, surprise. And then in June of 1990, I remember I was doing a show at an AIDS hospice here in Los Angeles called the Chris Brown AIDS Hospice. I had gotten a couple of $1,000s from the city, part of the Los Angeles City Cultural Affairs Department. And I got it to create a show and do a performance at the AIDS hospice. And I did, which was a surreal experience. And then anyways, I got home, and these were in the days before cell phones, 1990. And I saw I had like 26 messages on my voice answering machine. And it was like, oh, CNN and the New York Times. And they're going, can you comment? The National Endowment for the Arts just rescinded your grant, you and 3 other performance artists, because we were too controversial and too sexual or whatever. I didn't even know. I just heard that. Oh, I didn't even know I had gotten the grant. I had gotten it that day, and then they took it away the same day. And Senator Jesse Helms was very behind that, because us performance artists. I mean, 3 of us were gay. One was a woman. She was somewhat of a, what would you describe her? A feminist, revolutionary, tear it apart kind of gal. But our themes were too sexual and controversial. And so they decided that the National Endowment got worried because of all the political blowback from Dana Rohrabacher here in California and a bunch of other conservative lawmakers. And then the church started getting involved. And so they took away our grants. And then we went to the Supreme Court. We got a bunch of lawyers, Lawrence Tribe, and the Center for Constitutional Rights behind us. And we went to the Supreme Court, and we won. And we got our grants back. We were fighting for that. How do you I don't know, put morality into artwork? Because one man's profanity is another man's philosophy. I mean, it's hard to say what's moral and moral. And all of us, we felt we were doing the morally right thing. We were fighting for justice, for equal rights, for gays, for women. I don't know, just to open up our mind's eye. Going back to Star Trek reference there. So anyways, we won our grants. Actually, we got several $100,000. Of course, I only got 5,000, and the lawyers got like 400,000. But hey, it was the principle. And but then the NEA said after it was all done. Oh, excuse me. Oh, but it was during the Clinton administration, and I felt like they were throwing a bone to the conservatives, and they said that okay. That they're going to eliminate the genre that we were funded. It was called new genre performance. So they eliminated that from the National Endowment. And they also said that issues of morality can be considered when you give funding. So it was a blessing and a kind of a curse at the same time. A lot of people blame us for the fact that that they lost funding in the future because of the NEA Four. But anyways, hey, got a lot of publicity from it, and I gotta say, after that, I started working in Hollywood a lot. So I guess any press is good press, even if it's bad press sometimes.
The topic of censorship has been a pretty hot one in the arts world, just overall for the past 4 years we've had in this country. And it's an interesting case still to this day because we're looking at, let's say, let's take a trip back in time. Let's talk about the paintings by Goya, which are very politically charged and oftentimes very violent. And back then they would be controversial. Today, the stuff that you were doing, it's a different kind of level. Things have progressed, but it's like for a government to say what is okay, what is not. It's definitely some interesting ground we're covering here.
You got to be careful with that. I mean, even like, in the visual arts, like Alexander Calder with his mobiles, and the various shape, that was considered like too controversial to fund at one time. Not that it was obscene or anything, but it was considered bad art. And now, what was considered a travesty and bad art now is like, ooh, it's in museums around the world. So, yeah. So yeah, censorship is a curious thing.
A lot of your performance art was very much sexually charged at the time. And it seems like, I'm sure a lot of it was very autobiographical. A lot of those decisions you made in those pieces were informed by what happened with you growing up and things like that. It's definitely a very thin line that you're walking here because there is so much stuff like, again, we're talking about you reading passages from the Bible that are written on toilet paper while you're peeing. Where does art fit into, I guess, controversy? Like these two things go together, but how do you balance these two things without going way over the top?
Well, like I said, I started performing in punk clubs, so I was always into I like the shock and awe and the kind of primal extreme experiences, and I think of artists that have kind of really gotten to me as the ones that I just, where I feel a lot of, I remember seeing like Karen Finley perform where he's just like, he starts pounding on the table. I don't even know what's coming over me, but she's like channeling. I mean, not that she's a shaman or anything, but like you're channeling a primal energy, and you can't really put it into words, but it taps into something. So I always like to I like to go as far as I could back in the early days. I've really toned down as I've gotten older. Maybe I'm censoring myself now, who knows? But back in the early days, no, it was about doing something that, oh God, oh no, you shouldn't do that. But whoa. And you're like, oh, our heads are blowing off the top of us. And yes, this is a communal feeling. And you're expressing something that you really can't put into words, but something that is universal. And it's just like getting us all just worked into a frenzy, and not just for frenzy's sake or shock's sake. I like to think that I was kind of like channeling negative energy and creating something positive, that there was something on the other side of this action that I created that was transcendent in a way. And kind of, I always felt my work as much as I spit, and because back in the 80s, for us performance artists, it was all about our bodies. I was always running around naked, and I used spit as like a lighting effect. In the light, it created a beautiful mist around you. So and my urine, yes, it was shocking, and I know it would get shocking. And when I read the Bible, while I'm doing that, I knew it would get shocking. But I was also thinking, well, why can't you read a Bible and have a miracle? I was experiencing a miracle, and so just questioning, well, why does a miracle have to be, just well, where flowers bloom and, a woman comes floating in with a robe. Why can't we experience miracles in different ways? Does that make any sense?
I think it does. Yeah.
Okay.
It kind of leads to my follow-up too, though, is, a lot of your work is very much in your face. It's very loud in a lot of ways, if you will. Like, you did a series of paintings, which is basically, you got paint on your butt and you sat down. That was a gallery show. Yeah, we're going back for that. Yeah. And it's very much about being very visceral, very guttural, and very loud, I guess. And I don't mean loud in a negative way, but your message is very clear what you want to get through. So
Right.
Why does John Fleck choose to go as loud as he is, as opposed to other artists who would go more subtle, more pulled back, more refrained?
Well, it's funny you should mention that. I feel like I'm going a little more in the subtle vein these days. In the 80s, it was loud. It was a nuclear explosion. Where did it come from? Probably from years of growing up, never expressing one friggin' feeling in my life, and just kind of keeping it all bottled up and trying to be what daddy wanted me to be and what society wanted to be. And now, here I am in the late 80s and just like, wow, there's all this expression. I mean, it was an expressive time, you know. AIDS was running rampant in my community. You know, Ronald Reagan and the administration, they would not talk about it. There was all this condemnation from religious conservatives about, you know, homosexuality, and this is payback time. And there was just rage. And I channeled it, and like I said, not just to, you know, just to tear it apart, but also to break open and to free, oh God, to heal. I mean, to me it was very healing personally, and I think for a lot of my audience, you know, it was a healing, cathartic experience that we needed to feel and be part of at that time. So yeah, they were loud, messy, sloppy, and but as it's funny, as the 90s began to progress and I started doing more film TV, I started bringing video into my pieces and playing many more characters and creating more of plot lines. Before it was just a behavioral kind of cathartic boom, explosions, and now I was getting more into stories and
kind of like Mad Women, which you have the poster right behind you.
Oh, you know, I didn't even think about that. This one, Bill Viola. Do you know Bill Viola? This great video artist. God, he's in all the museums. But anyways, I got to be one of his models, so to speak, and he even signed this. We had a big thing at the Getty thing, and at the Getty Center here in LA. But I just found out he has Alzheimer's and he doesn't even know who he is anymore. So you know, sad. Anyways, I've gotten off course. So there you go.
I found it interesting how you talked at the start of this interview about your toxic relationship with your parent, with your father. But, you know, again, talk about what you just talked about now. It's like you got through that catharsis to get where you are today, where you can acknowledge that there were bad times, but you got something out of it as well. And all these things have kind of built up to this momentum of here you are today, 2021. You've got this new direction in your artwork, new direction for John Fleck. So definitely been, I guess, an evolution, right, for yourself?
Well, yeah, you know, I ain't no spring chicken. Boy, I'm a survivor here. I'm gonna be 70 years old in May, you know? I know I don't look a day over 68, but you know, yeah, I'm very aware of back then and now, and what's coming, I don't know. But I'm very aware, especially after seeing that documentary that you made on your Uncle Hank. That really moved me a lot and just made me aware that here I am and I'm still creating artwork, and I don't know, I'm not making a lot of money with it, but you know, I made enough money in Hollywood and I've invested wisely. I don't need to make money right now. So I'm just focusing on art, creativity for creativity's sake. And you know, not that I'm religious, but I have a kind of a little meditative prayer I do every morning. How can I be of service to my creative higher power? And before it had to be, you know, that bar was really high. I had to do this. I had to get, you know, I had to make money with it. I had to get a lot of attention. And now my bar is much lower. I'll tell you, even going in the front yard and planting a flower is a creative act. So, but just with that in my being, I just find, a lot of creativity in my life is happening all of a sudden. I'm just saying yes. So, and I'm not putting a lot of like, I got to get money. I need this, and just letting it be what it is.
I think that's a good summation of what creativity is. It's really about bringing something to life and saying yes. That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Well, there you have it. I mean, improv 101. Just say yes. You say yes. Ask me a question so I can say yes.
Well, let's get back on Star Trek, shall we?
Oh, sure. Yes.
There you go. All right, good. You're paying attention. So yeah, so let's talk about Enterprise, because that is basically your longest role as the same character throughout the franchise. You are Silik from the Suliban. I just rewatched all of your episodes, in fact, as Silik, so I got to see the entire story play out once again.
Oh my God, you are a glutton for punishment.
You know, watching season 1 of Enterprise is a punishment in itself. But yeah, no, I mean, I got to watch all your appearances. Quite a ride you had as a character. But let's just start at the beginning. And, you know, as an actor, I'm just wondering, you know, a lot of folks create backstories for their characters. For someone like Silik, did you ever approach it that way? Did you create a backstory, or did you just kind of take the role as it was and run with it? Run with what they gave you?
I think the essence for Silik was I was going to prove to to Scott Bakula, to John. What was his last name? John Archer? No,
Jonathan Archer. Yep.
Jonathan Archer.
You called him John in the show. Silik never said Jonathan. You always called him John.
I was going. It was who was going to win the game here, and I was going to prove that we aliens or we Suliban were much more intelligent than any humans. And it was quite the little chess game. I always felt like I was playing chess with John. And I was going to be on top. Of course, I always ended up on the bottom. I mean, we don't have to go into these.
We just talked about your bulges, John. We only have an hour here.
But I do remember distinctly working with Scott, and just what a gentleman he was, and so kind. And hey, once again, he came from the theater world. What a sweet, kind man. But and very professional. And but it was fun. It was fun. It's nice to have an arc, where you can kind of play with. And yeah. So in terms of backstory, oh geez, I can't remember if I try to ground it as much, reality in so much as my imagination can conjure, just so it's not just an actor saying words. But I always feel with these aliens, like backstory is like millions and millions of years of evolution, and what emotions, everything is different, but the primary thing was to win, so to speak, win the game.
Now, did you do a lot of makeup tests for Silik before they settled on what they went with?
I don't remember a lot of makeup tests. I mean, I do remember, the color, for the camera. We had to do, there was some adjusting during the first day. I don't know if they did a camera test before. I know when I was doing Carnival for Gecko, God, they did a lot of shoot camera tests. But for Silik, I just remember, I mean, they had the prosthetics. It was all, I mean, that was the thinnest prosthetic that I'd ever used. So it really showed my face off. Before the other ones, it was a lot of, extra padding and rubber, whatever, the latex. But this was skin. It was just like skin almost. And they'd be very careful gluing it on me. But in terms of the model, the makeup, I can't remember how many tests they had to do. But yeah, they kind of knew what they wanted, I think, from the very beginning.
Can you describe a typical day in the makeup chair for that makeup? Because that's I find that actually a very, very unique look for the entire Star Trek franchise too. It's a pretty unique looking alien.
Yeah, why is that? Because they don't have all the extra doodads on it. Yeah,
I think the color's pretty unique. The contacts are unique. I mean, most aliens always have the contacts, but in this case, it was definitely like a humanoid type alien, but it was so far fetched. It was such an abstraction from a humanoid alien, and still an abstraction without going over the top.
Well, I mean, in terms of makeup, I mean, it was about 3.5 hours in, just getting into it, because they had to be so precise. And if the thin, it was like crepe. It was so thin, the stuff. And if they got off a little bit, they had to take it all off because it wouldn't crease right, when you moved and stuff like that. So it was very, very tricky. And, for me, it's always the contacts. I wear glasses. I don't wear contact lenses, and these giant contacts, those were the torture for me, and I do remember the skin tight costume, and like, oh my God, I remember lying in my trailer in between shoots, and you do feel like you're like embalmed. It's almost like you're in a torture chamber. And I realized a lot of actors can't do this because it freaks you out. You feel like you got to rip it off. You can't breathe, So I just really had to get into meditation and just breathe. I'm okay. I'm not trapped. I'm not in like some torture kind of rap. And I do remember, like, boy, you better take a leak before you get into the costume, because or if you have to go the other route, you're up Schitt's Creek, so to speak, because to get out of that costume, all the zippers are behind. You can't do it yourself, so it's embarrassing. You go, oh, I have to go potty. Can you unzip me? It's just like, oh boy. So you gotta be careful what you eat. Oh, blah blah. It's quite the ordeal.
So in that pilot for Enterprise, one of the other main characters who was a guest star in this case was Tiny Lister. He was Klang. He's the very first Klingon we meet in Enterprise. Did you get to hang out with Tiny? He passed away very recently, but do you have any memories of him offset?
I do not remember Tiny. Did I have scenes with Tiny?
Kind of, sort of, but not really. It might have been a double that did stuff with him.
People think like you're seeing all these people, but man, you just see what's right in front of you. And if they're not in your scene, you usually don't even, your paths don't cross. It's in and out.
Well, tell us a bit more about Scott Bakula then, because I don't really have to talk about him much on the show. I've talked to like one or two people I've gotten to do some scenes with him, but you're having not just scenes, you're getting tussles with him. In your farewell episode, you get to be out of the makeup too. What do you remember about working with Scott? Was he a good scene partner?
Oh, he's a great scene partner, very giving. A lot of times when, the camera, turns on you and they're feeding you lines, a lot of, stars don't give you much. But Scott was always there. I swear it's the theater, training. And he was just kind. And, you could talk about stuff. You didn't, I just felt very open and free with him. Plus, I'd seen him do a lot of theater, back in the early days here in LA. So we had that connection. And I think he appreciated that. And yeah, just fun, fun to hang at a cast party with him. He felt like he's just a normal guy.
Silik and Archer have a ton of fights throughout those episodes together, and I've heard that Scott Bakula is pretty handy. He liked to do his own stunts. But in terms of these fight scenes, how often was John Fleck the one actually throwing those punches and jumping around?
Well, I'm pretty physical, and then back then I was even more physical. God, that was like what, 20 years ago, about. So I didn't do a lot of stunts, the bigger stunts, but the fight scenes I try to do as much as I can. But there was always, a good stunt double ready to jump in for me, So I appreciate that. Yeah.
And I've got to ask about working with the one true star of Enterprise, Porthos. Did you get to hang out with the Beagle very much?
No, I never even met the Beetle.
Oh, that's sad.
Beagle. Yeah, I know. He wasn't working the day I was working, unfortunately.
So, in terms of the character's ultimate path, we do get to have a farewell to the character. And rewatching again, it felt like it was a little bit rushed, and that Silik didn't really get to have his full potential as a character. What did you think about the way he went out?
Well, I think you might be right that it was rushed. I think they probably got an announcement that the season that the franchise was closing, so they had to wrap it up quickly. Yeah, it's like, whoa, all of a sudden I'm going down to earth and I don't have the makeup anymore, which I appreciated. I didn't have to do the makeup, but hey, I was grateful for what I got. I got to have a little moment, man on man, so to speak, with Scott when we weren't fighting, me and my makeup, and so that's kind of what I remember. Working late into the night on the Paramount set there, and I don't know. I do remember just being there and not having. I was just so relieved I didn't have to do all the makeup, and just thinking, you know what, this is kind of an actor's dream to be working at, in Hollywood on the Paramount studio lot and got a nice scene. Hey, life is good. It was also, I do remember, I was also working at Carnival during the same time. So they had to coordinate shooting schedules. And, I was doing heavy prosthetic makeup on Carnival as Gecko, and I was doing all this heavy prosthetic makeup on as Silik. And my skin was starting to burn and flake off from all this makeup removal. So I remember the day when at the last shooting day on, Enterprise, when I didn't have to do the makeup, my skin was all peeling. So they had to do a lot with moisturizer and makeup to make it look like I wasn't, had a bad sunburn. So I do remember that.
You were doing like 10-hour makeup days on Carnival, right? Because you were doing like full body prosthetics.
Well, yeah, that was like, I think, like one of the first episodes of Carnival, and it was I had a couple full body days, and that would be probably I'd have to show up like about 3-4 in the morning, for like a 10 a.m. shoot. So I'd be pretty much in the makeup trailer, for 6 hours or more. Yeah, crazy. And then to take it off was another, 3 hours at least. But ka-ching, 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 overtime, baby.
I mean, I feel like that's got to be like the main motivator to help you sit through those 3 hours plus of makeup every time, because you did it so many times for Star Trek and other things.
I know. I did have a little calculator in there. Oh, we're in overtime. Oh, we're in golden time. Okay, torture me all you want.
So for someone who's had to wear makeup that's oftentimes constricting your eyebrows, a lot of your facial movements, what do you do as an actor to perform effectively?
Well, that's interesting, because it is about you have to, you got to express, create some emotion underneath as a human to translate beyond the makeup. So, yeah, when I was first starting to do it, they said you need to be expressive with your muscles, and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's kind of like, I guess, bad acting in a way if you didn't have the makeup on, because you don't want to be doing that stuff. But when you do have makeup, you gotta kind of just accentuate, I don't know, facial movements and stuff like that. Not too extreme, but it has to register.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're basically describing. It's very much like a kabuki-ish kind of thing, but you can't be over the top kabuki either. It's a pretty
Right,
tough balance.
right. It's got to be grounded in some reality. Yeah. But when you're an alien, what is real, and I don't know. So, but you got to use your body. So that's it.
So if you could have had creative freedom, if let's say he doesn't die in that last episode we see him in, what would you like for the character to do next? Where would you like him to go?
Where would I have liked Sword to go? Well, I like the fact that he was a shapeshifter, and I often wish that they had played more with his shape shifting capabilities. I mean, why not? Because fun to come back as like some sultry old dame or something. Not that that would be believable. That's why they never did it. But I always wish I could have shapeshift into different people, so to speak, and just shapeshifting into me at the end, so to speak.
Silik shows up one day as Phyllis Diller.
Yeah, that'd be great. Or Margaret Hamilton. Oh God, Jesus.
And speaking of, by the way, Star Trek Enterprise, last thing about this too, you actually have an action figure of yourself.
I do have an action figure. Actually, I got a few of them in my little thing here. I keep saying, well, I'll save them. Maybe they'll be worth $50 each someday. Sell them on eBay. Yeah, I had a little action figure, a lot of cards, signed cards. Oh, I was pretty special. Silik was special.
I'm a big toy collector. I love asking folks who've got figures of themselves, what do you actually think of it? I mean, do you like the likeness of it? Does it look like you? Are you proud of that toy?
I was proud of that toy, and I can see myself. I mean, if nobody else can, I go, oh, wow, yeah, under all that makeup, I see my bone structure, my body structure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I thought they did a good job. Yeah.
So, what would you say then is your most favorite role within Star Trek?
Oh, my favorite role in Star Trek. Well, just from an acting point of view, that one you just mentioned with the courtroom scene, I don't even know what character I played, but I was a Romulan in that, wasn't I?
Yep, yeah, that was the Romulan
Yes,
Koval.
yes, that was one of my favorites, just because I got to act so much. And Silik, I excuse me, I loved having the arc. I love having an arc in any kind of TV show, just because then a story develops, and I get more of an inner life because the writing kind of opens up, my imagination, so to speak. So in the Star Trek thing, I always, the first time working was always a special time with LeVar Burton. That time, that was a very special time. My first introduction to Star Trek land. And I gotta say, the end, I guess, Enterprise. I wish the story had developed a little bit more, but that was special for me too. Yeah, because I got a doll. It's the only doll I got.
You did, and I need to get one of those signed one day. So hopefully, I'll see you at a convention one day, and I'm going to get my Silik figure signed by you.
I'll do it for half price.
Oh, nice. That'll be only $80. Nice.
For you, nothing, Matthew. It's free.
Right. So, John, you also have a documentary that's out, but the film essentially asks, who John Fleck is, and the title of that film is "John Fleck is Who You Want Him to Be." So, it begs me to have to ask this question. That's, who is John Fleck, and who do you want John Fleck to be?
Oh boy, Kevin asked me a question. It just came out, and that's what he edited and named the piece. Who are you, John Fleck? Well, I'm whoever you want me to be. I mean, spoken like a true actor, Who do you want me to be? How much do you want to pay me to do it? Who do I want John Fleck to be? I am searching for creative synergy, creative spirituality. That is who I want to be. I don't want to base my life on TV roles, on film roles, on how much money and this PR game that I got to have more. I am searching to be of service to the world. And I think by being creative and being honest and expressing myself and showing various ways of being expressive, that it can be a healing and spiritually connecting tool for all of us. So, but selfishly, mostly for myself, I just feel that if I open my my expressive being, that it saves me from from shutting down and digging a hole and wanting to run away from life as it's presenting itself right now.
Well, you definitely had quite a journey in life and through your art, using that to interpret all the different experiences you've had. So thank you for that gift you've given all of us. Whether some folks can handle it or not, that's a different story for another day. But thank you for putting it out there and basically,
Hey,
also.
it ain't for everybody. My work, I always say, it ain't for everybody. But hey, that's life, you know.
But all art is personal to some degree anyway, and if somebody can even get a little bit out of that, I mean, that's still a victory.
Yeah. Hey, I got 5 fans that are diehard fans in life. That's good enough for me. And you're one of them now. I got 6.
You got 6 now. throw 7. I'll have my girlfriend in there too.
Yay.
7. All right, that's a lot of royalty money right there. All right, so last question of the day, John. What is the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
Well, the best thing about being part of the Star Trek universe is that I get to talk to young fellas like you that is keeping the universe alive, you know? Boy, I who knew while I was doing all these roles over all these decades that it was such a phenom. I mean, it's truly an honor, you know, the fact that I'm like one of 3 actors to have played as many roles in this. You know, I poo-pooed it, you know, when I was doing it a lot of the times, you know, because, oh, I'm not a human being, I'm playing an alien. But boy, well, what a blessing, one of the greatest blessings of my life. And every time I get a residual check, I say, thank you, Rick Berman, thank you, Star Trek, exactly. You know, hey, who knew Star Trek would be such a force, you know, in the world? I mean, there'd be no Star Wars without Star Trek. I don't know. It's just there'd be no Avengers. There'd be no Iron Man. I think without it. I don't know. Or maybe I'm getting ahead of myself or behind myself. But anyways, I'm just I'm honored to that you asked me for this interview, and that the universe still lives on.
And fingers crossed, maybe we'll see John Fleck show up sometime in Strange New Worlds or Discovery or Section 31.
Hey, you never know. Hope springs eternal.
Well, John, thank you so much today for sharing so much of your stories, so much of your time with us today. I could easily talk to you for hours about everything else you've done because you've got such a prolific career. And it's always great to talk to someone who's also in the fine arts world too. It's a different perspective from things. And hopefully we can get you back on another day and talk a bit more in depth about all those things. But for today, at least, thank you so much for talking about all the Star Trek things with us. And I'm glad I could also refresh your memory in some of these things.
Boy, you certainly did refresh my memory. Yeah, you know more about my memory than I do. So thank you.
My job to know these things.
Yes. Well, thank you, Dr. Matthew. I appreciate it. Going where no man dared go before. Thank you.
And that was our chat with artist extraordinaire John Fleck. And now you hopefully understand my comments from the top of the show about him being a force of nature. I feel like during the time we spent doing this episode together, we only just began to peel away the layers and find the core of who John Fleck is. But then again, I get the feeling that there's always going to be more to him than meets the eye. I hope I can get a second chance to talk with him sometime and see what else we can discover about his time on Trek, his art, and just who exactly John Fleck wants to be. And I want to also add here, John sent me an email afterwards and wanted me to add this note to a thought we discussed during the show. And that was about his motivation for playing the part of Silik. John said he imagined him as one of a dying breed of aliens whose world was destroyed by a civil war that left only a few of his people alive. John considered the mission of his character to steal Enterprise to be just a part of a plan to gain valuable life-saving technology to save his species, but his mission was always foiled by his own vanity and desire to prove that the Suliban were more intelligent than the humans. In trying to get this ultimate victory over those humans, he kept causing his own defeat and, in turn, the downfall of his own species. And that's a pretty powerful way to look at this character who I think deserved a lot more than he got in the series. Despite the fact that Silik and his race of aliens appeared in so many episodes of Star Trek, I feel like they really weren't ultimately fleshed out as much as they could have been. And I especially believe that Silik deserved a much better death than what he got in the series. There was so much more to explore about all of their stories, and sadly with Enterprise ending after Season 4, well, a lot of questions were left unanswered. With that said, I'd love to know your thoughts about John Fleck's character and the Suliban, because we don't really talk about Enterprise enough on this show. And I think these villains of Archer and the crew were quite interesting to look at, so go ahead, hit me up on social media and tell me what you guys think about Silik and the Suliban. And by the way, there are links to Kevin Duffy's documentary about John Fleck in the show notes, so go ahead and make sure you check that out and give it a watch. It's currently available on Vimeo, and as it goes on to more platforms, we will update the show notes to reflect that. But really the main thing here is you gotta help support a member of the Star Trek family, and I think it's a truly fascinating exploration of an actor and an artist who deserves to be dug deeper into to better understand what he does and the motivations behind his work, because there's clearly a lot to him. And I'm also going to include a link to my documentary, Nothing Changes, which is what John was mentioning when we were talking about some art docs earlier on in this interview. After he sent me his doc, I sent him mine, and we had some nice chats about films and things like that. And my film definitely gave him some new thoughts and some new approaches to his way of looking at art and his life. So if that's something you might have interest in too, go ahead and check that out in the show notes as well. So that wraps up this week's episode of Trek Untold. Thank you so much for checking it out this week. Please make sure that you're following us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Trek Untold. That's one word, no spaces, at Trek Untold. It's the best way to get updates on guests, check out all the memes and other things that we're posting, and interact with myself and other Star Trek fans. If you'd like to support this podcast, go ahead and check out patreon.com/TrekUntold and become a subscriber to the show. Or check out teespring.com/stores/TrekUntold to check out some of our merchandise. If you've been enjoying Trek Untold, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to podcasts. And if you're on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, youtube.com/nerdnewstoday. Leaving ratings, reviews, and comments are things that all help this podcast grow, and they'll cost you nothing but a few seconds of your time. Doing things like that, or even telling your friends or other Star Trek fans about the stuff you've heard on the show and making sure they know about us, are huge helps to keeping Trek Untold growing. Thank you once again to our sponsor, Triple Fiction Productions. Go ahead and check them out at triple-fictionproductions.net. If you'd like to send us some feedback about this episode, suggest a guest, or ask to be booked on the show, go ahead and send me an email at trekuntold@gmail.com. And of course, thanks to listeners like you for choosing Trek Untold and making it your weekly Star Trek podcast. This has been Trek Untold. I'm Matthew Kaplowitz, and until next time, fortune favors the bold.
Trek Untold is sponsored by TrekSphere.com, promoting fan-produced Star Trek content in all forms, is powered by the Rageworks podcasting network, and is affiliated with Nerd News Today.